And hello and welcome to our second session for Emergency Services Management here, EMG 6305. And this is Dr. David Milan once again. And it's good to see all of you. Looking forward to working alongside you the rest of the term here with your discussion boards as well as your assignments that you have posted thus far. Nice job. Keep up the good work. Always remember to follow the APA guidelines in our discussion boards as with your references as well as the assignments that you're submitting. Also remember that your discussion board postings are due in a timely manner. I can float you a little bit of leeway in time on some of the assignments because I know that life happens, things go on. But with the discussion boards, I really need you to participate in the discussion boards as they are. And my big excuse on that is, if you can recall, that if you happen to walk into a room of people that have now been called out to go to dinner, you enter into that room of people and you want to hold a discussion with yourself. That's basically what happens at a discussion board once the discussion board has passed. So just keep in mind to be vigilant about posting in a timely manner, your initial post, and then subsequently posting to your colleagues during the designated week. And you'll be fine. Not a big deal. I think most of you have been doing so thus far, but just remember that this needs to be done in the future. If you're in the LPL courses, the Life Pace learning courses, please remember to submit your assignments in a timely manner, as well as reaching out to me and being able to identify some of those areas that you may need to work on ahead of time. And I'll be glad to float you a little bit of time as well for your assignments and everything. So this week, we are going to be looking at weeks 4 through 6, and we are going to be dealing with a couple things that I touched on in the previous lesson, just kind of as a refresher, just to make sure that you know where we are and where we're headed with our lessons, and perhaps it'll fuse some inspiration for you in the discussion boards as well as your assignments. So let's take a look at our first slide here in dealing with hospital flooding. Now, one issue that I can tell you about with hospital flooding is that it is very fluid. No pun intended. Okay, this thing is going to happen and ebb and flow with the tide, shall we say, when you have issues and when you have other items that you need to tend to. Something changes in a disaster or an emergency every 2 seconds, and we have to be aware of that as leaders. Much as I mentioned previously in our previous lecture, that you're going to need good help. You're going to need volunteers. You're going to need people that are going to work alongside you in disastrous situations at any cost. Some of the most valuable resources for a disaster will be your volunteers, and they'll be working alongside you and guiding you at times when you feel that you're too overwhelmed and probably don't feel that you have enough resources in order to mitigate some of the circumstances that you may be experiencing. For example, let's take a look at the flooding here. So some of the challenges addressing my hospital at the time, those of you who don't know from my bio, I had an opportunity to be flooded out of our hospital back in 2007 and work alongside many wonderful people at Franciscan Alliance, as well as from both Illinois and Indiana, mutual aid box alarm system. And that was basically calling all the alphabet police. That's the FD, the PD, and everybody else that had a boat or a bus or something that we could use in order to transport our patients and evacuate our hospital because we were flooding at the time. So basically, some of the challenges that we had during this time were looking at team management and the team conceptualization. How do you manage a team when you have water coming in your facility? Now, the water that was coming in there was not exactly the clean type that you come out of your faucet, shall we say. This type of water was from a little creek that is normally about ankle high and it's several blocks away from the facility. However, after you have a microburst, 5 inches of rain the previous night, and nowhere for this stuff to go because you're located in a concrete jungle, more or less, now you're going to have problems because this water has to go somewhere. So it decided to come up through the sewers and then pass into the main emergency department entrance as well as our main entrance there. So we had not only flooding to contend with, but also we have these people in our facility that are called patients, and we needed to deal with them. We also had a behavioral health unit that was attached to our hospital, and we had to figure out where we were going to perhaps move and relocate some of the behavioral health patients. In retrospect, and looking at this, it was very difficult to find a location because many of the mental health facilities that used to be available in Illinois, right across the state line, were no longer functioning, and it lost state funding for several years. At the same time, we didn't have any place in Indiana to relocate because the other locations were also flooded as well. So keep that in mind as we're working through this example. But the challenges that we face were trying to get people organized and trying to wonder who's going to stay. 33% of your entire workforce is going to disappear during an event or any type of emergency. So consider about 1/3 of what you have there will go back to their families. They'll go back to tending to other locations, and they will take a look for their pets and safety. And this is just human nature. Whether it's going to be in a hospital, whether it's going to be a public official, etc. That is the norm that you will experience during a disaster. So you have to conceptualize how you're going to deal with that with a lot less personnel, and then dealing with the situation that you have at hand. You have to realize is that running an effective operation with different types of personalities involved with your team. I can't express how many times that you have people out there that, no, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I'm in charge. Nope, you're going to do it my way. I'm going to do it my way. You're going to do it this way. You run into a lot of egos that are out there. And unfortunately, you have to deal with that, especially if you're going to be a good leader in emergency management in the field. A good leader will be able to compromise and work alongside those people that perhaps have stronger feelings and stronger opinions about things than other people do. And you have to mitigate those circumstances immediately in order for effective operations to occur. There'll be many times when you'll feel overwhelmed and policy will dictate one indication. However, you need to remain flexible. If you can remain flexible, then you have a greater opportunity of mitigating some of the circumstances that arise during an emergency situation, such as a flood. But you're also more capable of handling communication issues, collaboration issues, and any type of communication failure that may take place during an event. What we found was beneficial was that our president, as knowledgeable as he is and was at that time, we felt that it was better to work alongside others in the emergency management field in dealing with that, while the president was able to locate and figure out what else needed to be done regarding the evacuation of our patients, which was near and dear to his heart. So you basically a good leader will be able to identify some of the shortcomings immediately, also be flexible, and also be willing to hand over the reins to someone else in charge, and then have him or her report back to the president or the person that's in charge and get the job done. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of stamina, but also takes teamwork. It's not just being able to say that you're the person in charge or the incident commander. There's many other things that are involved that go on behind the scenes. It's the personnel, the people that are bringing the food. It's the people that are evacuating the patients off the floors when the elevators are no longer working and carrying them down steps. It's the person that just had open heart surgery, and you have ambulance crews that are coming in from different locations, and they're being coordinated by someone who's in charge of emergency services operations at that time. It's all going through one team concept and then channeling that information back over to the person that's in charge. So a synopsis of this hospital flooding, and not to belabor the point, but I think you get the idea. Leadership challenges are going to occur when there's a disaster. Something changes every 2 seconds, and you need to work alongside others during this time. The challenges that are faced are team management and then team conceptualization. How are you going to identify what the team is going to look like, who's going to participate, and what is their major function? And finally, here on our first slide, the ability to run an effective operation with different types of personalities. You will encounter that along the way. However, being a good leader and an effective leader, you'll be able to minimize some of the struggles and strifes that you're going to encounter, especially when tensions run high, when stress is high, and when there is very little to collaborate with and communicate with. That is when the good leader is going to rise above the rest and concur with the team, and also infer to others and say, what else can we do in this certain circumstance? And moving along to our next slide here, slide 2, we can see that a situation such as an active threat or active shooter is definitely going to be a challenge, and it's going to be fluid. Much like what we discussed in our flooding example, we do have active threats and active shooters that are occurring all over our country, unfortunately, and are numerous accounts taking place in the media. Whether it's going to be a school, a political rally, a church, a mall, theaters, whatever it may be, we need to be prepared and vigilant for those areas. Sometimes we're not so adept and aware of our surroundings, but we sometimes become complacent, unfortunately. But that's our nature, because we trust others around us, and we trust that it's safe to go to a mall. We trust that it's safe to enter into a theater and not have an issue when we're watching a movie. So we can see where something is going to happen, much like I gave you the example in the flooding example, that something changes every 2 seconds in an active threat, active shooter. Whether the person is going to walk through the movie theater and is unfortunately shooting at people, perhaps he or she is going to stop and reload the firearm. That's something different that changes. There's something unique that's going to change along the way, and then perhaps the fire is going to start once again. We need to deal with that, and then you have the SWAT teams that are going to be arriving, the barricades that may be going on, people that might be running out of the theater, for this particular example, running out of the theater and running for their lives. And these are the situations that a leader is going to have to deal with, especially with an incident commander that's going to arrive on the scene. Perhaps you may be an incident commander that arrives first on the scene, and you're going to have to give an eyewitness account of what's going on, what types of issues are occurring immediately, what types of personnel are going to be needed, and how you're going to work alongside those people that are going to be coming in, and perhaps turning over the scene to higher authorities that are working diligently and daily with this active threat, active shooter situation. One of the areas that kind of started this all off with the active threat, active shooter was Columbine High School. I think all of us remember the graphic scenes from the two boys that were running through the school and using different types of devices, as well as firearms, and harming and killing so many innocent people in there. This is a situation that started the active threat, active shooter training for our fire and EMS personnel, as well as police, because back then, at the time, it was just surrounding the area, surrounding the situation, and waiting for the person to come out. Well, in this situation now, they learned that you needed to mitigate the person, mitigate the circumstances surrounding the active threat and active shooter. Through this, we learned so many different things, and have now progressed to the point where so many educational opportunities are existing that it is beneficial and has minimized some of the situations and some of the deaths that have been occurring with an active threat, active shooter. We also have seen the Colorado movie theater area where you have a gentleman walking in and shooting innocent victims in the movie theater. Las Vegas, I think that one was one of the biggest ones that we've had in America, and one of the most recent ones that we've had, and that is very, very shocking indeed, having someone opening fire upon a crowd that's enjoying a concert and then shooting from his hotel window. And then, of course, another unforgettable one here is Sandy Hook Elementary School, and all the innocent children that died during these events and situations, all because of one person in disgruntled. These are things that are unfortunately our reality, and these are areas that we have to deal with. And as a leader in the field of emergency management, or a police department, or whether it's going to be fire personnel or EMS personnel arriving on the scene, these are really harsh circumstances that we have to come to grips with. We have to deal with, and we have to formulate a final decision on what's needing to be done, how it's going to be done, and who are the key personnel that are going to assist us during this time. And more importantly, we have to deal with the families that are all involved in these situations, and delicately work alongside them in the unfortunate circumstances that may arise out of these situations. It's never easy to approach a parent in regards to their child in any such a a manner. However, this again falls into the hands of leadership, and being educated as well as having good field experience will also be able to minimize some of the grief and the experiences that will be demonstrated after such an event. So, basically what we're looking at here in active threat, active shooter, you're looking at numerous accounts taking place in the media. We're looking at various locations that have been occurring in our nation, and then something changing every 2 seconds, kind of like a regular natural disaster. This is a human-made disaster, and this is something that'll also happen too. And the examples that we have are Columbine, Colorado, Las Vegas, and in Sandy Hook. And you know that there's countless others, but these are some of the main ones that I wanted to bring to your attention and provide you with a learning experience. In slide 3 here, you can see that the active threat, active shooter, the locations are going to continue to emerge. They're going to be fluid. It's not just going to be one area, one designated location. It's going to be various locations at any time, any place, anywhere. We can see that even religious affiliations and religious facilities are not immune to having an active threat, active shooter, especially with a disgruntled person. That may be a parishioner. That may be a loved one of another person that perhaps is going through a severe, harsh time or a divorce. These are the areas that oftentimes bring forth some of these active threat, active shooter situations there. And again, there's no set profile. We oftentimes think that it might be somebody that has a long hair and a beard and ripped jeans and numerous tattoos and a very stereotypical look. And that's not the truth. The truth is, it can be a successful business person who may have lost a successful business client from the past previous years. It could be someone that is engaged and an engagement has broken off. It could be the loved one of an elderly person that is bedridden in a hospital, and they do not appreciate the types of treatment that are occurring, that is happening at that designated time. It might be that type of individual. And again, there's no set profile, so it can be male or female. And most instances here, when there is an active threat, active shooter situation, that person is not going to want to confront police. They are also normally acting by themselves, meaning that they're acting alone. And unfortunately, that person will probably be committing suicide once they're approached by police, SWAT, and being surrounded. So keep that in mind as a leader, that it's not going to be a cardboard cutout of things or a cookie cutter. It's going to be dealing with those areas. And then you're going to need to understand the big question: what can be done? What's going to be going on here in this circumstance, and who's going to be in charge, and how am I going to be working alongside people? My two favorite words: it depends. It really does. It just depends on the situation and how you're going to be addressing it. Who's going to be working alongside you, how you're going to diligently work with circumstances, and also how you're going to finalize the after action report. So this way, this circumstance does not happen again, or if it does happen again, there'll be a greater chance of minimizing the loss of lives. So the locations continue to emerge. There's really no set profile for the active threat, active shooter that occurs. And then finally, the leadership issues that you may encounter with the active threat, active shooter. It just depends, and it will depend on a situation that is forever flexible, forever fluid, and one that needs to be addressed quickly. And the reason why it needs to be addressed quickly, aside from human life loss, is that one person dies every 12 seconds in an active threat, active shooter. And hopefully the police can arrive between 5 minutes and 7 minutes, which is optimum. But in most instances, due to several calls and perhaps lack of police personnel availability at that time, it takes approximately 10 to 12 minutes for the police to arrive. And that's prior to getting involved in mitigating the threat and the circumstance. So you can do the math. That's why it is imperative as a leader to educate yourself, train others, train yourself, and being able to minimize life loss and dealing with this active threat, active shooter situation, which will continue to grow in the upcoming years, unfortunately. So on slide 4 here, we offer some perhaps suggestions or some probable solutions along the way. One of them is dealing with more training for schools and the facilities and the employees. It's not just good enough just to train yourself. And it's much like when you receive your degree, you may place it on the wall and look at it and say, boy, look what I have accomplished. But whose life are you impacting? You need to get out there and you need to utilize your degree so this way others are able to benefit from your work, your diligence, and being able to move forward with training, education, and development. So one of the things that we're debating right now is looking at how training occurs for school children in dealing with it, whether it's going to be an active threat, active shooter, if it's dealing with bioterrorism, or if it's dealing with things such as a tornado. The feeling is that the children need to know about it, but on the other hand, you don't want to traumatize the children into these areas. The approach that one needs to take will depend on the leadership style. I'm more proactive, and I tend to say that the children need to know about this because this is their world. This is their reality. This is what they're going to be dealing with in the future. And the more that we're able to work alongside the children in educating them on disasters and emergency management, perhaps the better. You can respectfully disagree with me, and that's okay because we're students and colleagues and friends and such. But in the long run, I think students will be able to benefit from that training and education ahead of time. So this way they know what to expect and are not caught off guard, shall we say. Also, there's continuing concerns regarding safety. How many safety locks and doors and windows and glass montages can we put inside of a school or a building in order to maintain safety? It's just astronomical at one, the amounts of monies that are going into safety and development of our schools, for example. But it also needs to be looked at as you don't want the schools to be just a complete lockdown to where the students are not going to be able to learn, where they might be more traumatized by the building that they're entering rather than the training they might receive. These are some of the situations where good communication and coordination alongside the school district, alongside the police, the fire, the EMS, and meeting and saying, hey, we need to sit down and talk about this. What do you all think would be beneficial for the students at this juncture? The other issue is the psychological footprint. Much as you probably have learned that in a disaster, the psychological footprint might not be immediate. It might be a year from now, it might be 3 years from now, and it might be something that has been triggered by an event that has recently taken place. If that's the case, be prepared for something to trigger that event, and it might cause depression, it might cause anxiety, it might cause some different type of recollection that is unpleasant to that person. But someone who is seemingly, quote unquote, normal at that time might have a flashback to that particular thing, and it might cause post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's not uncommon for families to experience that during a disaster, the loss of a loved one, or in an event such as active threat, active shooter, where this might go on for a great period of time before the shock wears off, and then all of a sudden the realization sets in that this had taken place. So again, please keep in mind that one person in this event here dies every 12 seconds in an active threat, active shooter situation. So just to recapitulate here, remember that there needs to be more training for our schools, our facilities, our employees that are involved in the organizations. The debate's currently an ongoing thing regarding training and education for school-age children. There's continual concerns regarding the safety and the viability of training programs, as well as the psychological footprint that may leave an impression upon kids. But we also have to realize that life loss is quite high in these situations, and at mitigating these circumstances ahead of time with training and education and facilitators that know what occurs will definitely be making a positive social change and impact upon all people that are involved. All right, let's move on. Slide 5 here. We're looking at diversity, culture and diversity in the emergency management world. It's like, hey, whoever thought of that? You mean there's other people that deserve opportunities? You mean that someone else can lead the troops in the team into a disaster and emergency response? Well, absolutely, of course. There's a sense of well-being and a sense of understanding for cultural diverse issues. And we need to understand that it's not just going to be one person in charge, that it's going to be multiple people. The working environment that you have is going to be dedicated to your team, be dedicated to the people that are working around you. So, a sense of respect for other people's thoughts, other people's ideas, the generalities that may be out there that you can make a little bit more specific, and even being able to assign these people to other tasks and other areas where they are comfortable with, what they are good at, and then bringing that to the table and allow them to have that shining moment. That's kind of a cultural diversity and a cultural world that we have within an organization. And then training and education will be needed. Are we training and educating ourselves? Yes, as leaders, we need to do that. We need to be educated more in cultural diversity and diverse opportunities that are out there. But we also need to train our personnel, because sometimes our personnel are very focused, are very direct, and do not have the same viewpoint, shall we say, and they do not respectfully disagree. They're very vocal in some instances. That's where training and education come in. You as a leader can go out and facilitate the training yourself. You can also have external resources and people come in and speak who have been on the diversity path and have good cultural competence as to what goes on within an organization. Or you can look at other content where you can have role play, and you can also have areas that distinguish one another as working as a team, or something that can be a little bit more confrontational and challenging as such. I think having external auditors and external advice coming into an organization is very valuable, because it's not showing the ingrown and this is the way we think, and we're just going to follow this way. This way, if someone has external thoughts and ideas that have not been promoted before, that even demonstrates further cultural diversity. It also demonstrates a caring and compassion that occurs for that organization and for the people that are working there. So cultural diversity within the emergency management world does have challenges. A sense of respect as well as a sense of understanding for cultural and diverse issues is going to be needed. And then, of course, you need to train and educate others within that field in an effort to minimize some of the circumstances surrounding cultural diversity that may not be taking place. Moving forward here in slide 6, we can see where women are underrepresented in the emergency management world. And they're facing many challenges, and it's hard to distinguish some of those barriers, and hard to break down a lot of those barriers. But breaking down the barriers and moving forward as a group definitely has its benefits and privileges. Also, the training and education that is needed has to be a multivariate, and also has to be something that is going to distinguish the cultural barriers that may exist within the emergency management field, or perhaps within your organization as a whole. There's many opportunities that are made available, but it just has to be a culturally diverse workplace. I have found in my dealings with emergency management and fire departments, as well as working alongside many good people in the hospital system, that having a culturally diverse workforce, as well as allowing good representation from women in leadership positions, has been beneficial, with different thoughts, different ideas, and different ideologies that perhaps we haven't thought about before. And then we also need to understand that there's a talent pool that needs to be present for women out there. A good talent pool and open-mindedness will be great in an effective manner for women to become more involved in emergency management services, leadership positions, as well as making some final decisions in areas, again, that have not been tapped into perhaps. And then we have to minimize the stereotypes. So we oftentimes hear that saying that that's a man's position, and that's where it is, and a woman wouldn't be able to handle these circumstances. which is farthest from the truth. There's a lot of good and a lot of good thoughts and a lot of educated women that would be very beneficial to emergency management and handling situations and stressful situations. And whether it's going to be the incident commander or if it's going to be at a unified command post, there's room for opportunity for all of us to learn from one another, to respect one another, and to offer opportunities for one another, especially when we're in an emergency. So we can see that women are underrepresented in the emergency management field. We need to break down those barriers. Training and education in our facilities and organizations will be necessitated, and then talent pool needs to be there as well. Present women in emergency management, and then finally, it starts from the top down, and then right from the bottom up, to where we need to minimize some of the stereotypes and the misnomers that we've had over the past decades in emergency management in order to overcome some of these social barriers that we are experiencing. In our next slide, these are some possibilities. This is not the end all be all for reformation regarding what we've just talked about, but these are some of the possibilities out there. One is to allow significant reformation within the organization to deter unwanted practices, such as excluding women from executive leadership positions, much as I mentioned in the previous slide. Inclusion is good. Transparency is good. The ability to work alongside one another is good, because when it comes time for emergency situations, all hands on deck, we all need to work alongside one another and walk the walk and talk the talk. So we need to be able to do all these things. And then the next approach basically suggests that leaders within the organization are going to continually evaluate all the aspects of the organization, and simply by asking, how does this aspect of the organization impact gender equality? And those are tough questions to ask, and sometimes they might be tough issues to address, but working together and face-to-face at the table, being able to identify those shortcomings and circumstances that are going to arise is very valuable. And it is very impressive to see once perhaps policies and organizations are developing alongside one another, then we can definitely say there is reformation that is occurring. So significant reformation occurs from top down, bottom up. You need to work alongside one another and allow opportunities for executive leadership positions. And also you need to look at how leadership positions are going to continuously flow and evaluate all the aspects within the organization by asking how this aspect in the organization can be addressed, and how is it going to make an impact on gender equality in a positive social manner. In slide 8 here, we can see that some of the effective measures that have been working well. Practice of effective negotiations. Again, it deals with communications. Not only are we supposed to communicate in the field, but we are also supposed to communicate with one another. And dealing with our cultural and religious and social beliefs, sometimes it can be challenging in doing that. However, the ability to practice effective negotiations has to come from the heart, basically, and a good leader will be willing to supplement some of the thoughts and ideas and other areas that may be sparse at times because we don't know exactly how to address it. But I think that comes where training and education are going to be at the forefront when dealing with one of the effective measures here. And then consider how professionals within the organization can motivate and mentor women towards such promotions in executive staff, or being the emergency manager for that particular county or for that particular event. It's a good food for thought that you include the opportunities there when you're training and doing exercises. These trainings and exercises are beneficial because it's in a safer environment, much like the rookie that comes on the fire department. As many of you may know, he or she doesn't know it all. And there needs to be kind of a hand holding session there to move that person along. So this way that person understands some of the dangers, the pitfalls, and some of the issues that may arise out there on the fire ground. Much is the same thing in being an emergency manager. You just can't take the policy and the book that was written 5 to 10 years ago and just say, okay, here, go and enjoy yourself. It happens, and it will be out there. However, being vigilant and saying, okay, how can I help you make this transition into this position a little bit better? Here's what we're expecting. Here's what we've done in the past. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? How do we make this work? Those are the steps that need to be taken. And then, point blank, cultures need to interact with one another. We are in a culturally diverse society. We always have been, as far as a melting pot here in the United States. And we need to work alongside one another. And we have to respect the fact that some of us are culturally diverse more than others. We have to respect the fact that religion is an important part of people's lives, and perhaps understand that not everything's going to be the way we see it all the time. In being able to comprehend and respect other people's well wishes, other people's desires, and their backgrounds, that is going to be a foundation for us to build upon. And being open-minded. As an emergency manager and a person that is in a leadership position, you definitely need to be open-minded. You need to be willing to accept the different cultural backgrounds that you have in the workplace and be respectful of those. Be respectful when a person has asked, is it okay if he or she is excused from an event or perhaps an office meeting for time for prayer or whatever it may be. Those are the things that we need to take into great heart and heed when we're making our leadership decision. So effective negotiations and working alongside people in our organization in a culturally diverse manner. Also considering how professionals with the organization can motivate and mentor women towards those executive situations, executive areas and promotions. And then finally, how cultures are going to interact with one another. Good cultural diversity training can be accomplished within your organization in order to minimize some of the questions, some of the caveats, and perhaps some very heated disagreements that may occur because there is a lack of knowledge regarding a particular culture. So on slide 9 here, now that I've babbled enough about cultural diversity and how to mitigate some of those circumstances, what we're looking at here is defining culture. You're probably saying, Dr. Mylan, isn't there a definition? Of course there is. There are plenty of definitions out there, but culture can be defined as a group who shares a set of common beliefs, social norms, values, and perspectives. But it also comes from gaining knowledge as a professional out there in the field, adopting and giving a practice or part of a practice to improving efficiency within our cultural norms, as well as our diverse environment that we work in at our workplace. So culture is something that's going to be a common belief, a social norm, the values and perspectives that are going to be portrayed, as well as being able to understand and acquire that knowledge through an open mind in a diverse atmosphere. It takes a very, very big person to admit fault or perhaps not understanding and saying, hey, you know what, I didn't realize that. And it's okay. I've been in those situations as well where I didn't understand a particular belief or something. However, in being the better person, the better leader, and addressing that, pulling that person on the side and asking what this is about and understanding what the common belief is about. What perspective are they coming from? What is the cultural belief from that? That minimizes many, many questions, and that also works alongside the person and making that person feel good, knowing that someone else cares and believes about what that person's culture is about, how that person is feeling, and what that person may have to do during the course of their daily activity in order to meet their obligations. And switching gears here, as far as transformational leadership is concerned, I think that's a good transformation right there, being culturally diverse and understanding what the cultural diversity means. A good transformational leader is going to focus on the idea of other leaders that were there before and then assisting others within that group for inspiration purposes and working it to accomplish their goals, their tasks, their ideas. So that's a big part of it. And then from an emergency management perspective here, transformational leaders are clearly going to conceptualize their expectations from the beginning to the end of a response effort, meaning that they have to continually think about something that is going to occur, something that is continually going on in order to assist people during an emergency situation, or when something has changed over as far as leadership in general is concerned. If leadership changes midstream, well, there's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride at first, because you're so accustomed to doing things one way, and then there's this big transformation right in the middle. Now, if there's an announcement that a transformation is going to take place, if there's an announcement that where the leader is going to be coming in this new position because someone has been retired, it kind of softens the blow a little bit. And then there's going to be a goal and objective list, I'm sure, that's going to be out there for the transformational leader to adhere to. But at the same time, it's also going to minimize some of the fear that's going to occur in the group or the team that has been so accustomed to someone, perhaps for the past 20 years, in mitigating their questions and also answering a lot of those questions that are going to take place for transformation during that time. So again, transformational leadership focuses around the idea that leaders are able to assist and inspire their groups, but also from an emergency management perspective, they're able to conceptualize the expectations from beginning to end. And carrying on with our next slide here for transformational leadership, one way for a transformational leader is to guide those followers. And this is where the transformational leader can come up and say, I'm going to be your mentor. I'm going to help you through a lot of these areas. I'm going to give you a morale boost, so to speak. Because let's face it, when you take over a certain circumstance, a lot of people are questioning. A lot of people are looking and wondering, oh, well, how is this going to work? Who's going to be in charge? Are we going to remain the same? How is this going to differ from what we've done before? There's a lot of fear in change. Well, one thing in life that's constant is change, and how we address that and how we get rid of that fear will be dependent upon us as a team member, but also the leader. When the leader comes in and says, this is what we're going to be doing, and here's the reason why we're going to be doing this. I've heard that so many of you are so talented in so many different ways and diverse actions and areas that I would like to keep doing that in most cases. However, I do have different pathways and areas that I would like to investigate and research and perhaps test us a little bit along the way. But don't fear that we're not going to utilize your talents here. So that is being a good leader in transforming from one situation into a newer situation. And transformational leaders also motivate the group of followers. They create an atmosphere of support, emphasizing a high standard of values. I can't tell you how many times that I've been out in the field and have seen people that have been scolded literally in front of their peers, their colleagues, etc., because perhaps they made an error. And a good transformational leader will say, hey, okay, I understand that it's been done this way. This is kind of the way that I like to have it being done. And it doesn't have to be done in front of people. You can witness what has been taking place. You pull the person on the side, and then you discuss that situation with that person. That will make sure that the person understands that you have respect for him or her. You also believe in what they're doing, and you also just want to say, this is kind of what I'm looking for and kind of what I want you to do with this, rather than being called out in front of your peers and definitely being scolded in such a manner. So transformational leaders are guides, and they allow their followers to be supported by the change that the membership has, but also it's going to be a morale boost eventually, because the transformational leader wants that person to succeed. And then the transformational leader is going to motivate those groups of followers by creating a supportive atmosphere, a positive working environment, as well as emphasizing the high standards of values that are going to be needed in order to continually succeed and perhaps surpass some of those previous successes that were done. We also have a charismatic leader. As you all can see, I'm not very charismatic, and I am just very dull and boring. A charismatic leader is going to demonstrate self-confidence. It's going to provide moral and ethical values, communicates with the high expectations that may be out there, and then find a way for the listeners or the followers to connect with the message. A charismatic leader is someone that is going to be on top of things as always, but also be willing to listen to what others have to say. A charismatic leader then will also be able to inject perhaps a little bit of humor in light of given situations. Emergency situations are very dramatic and can definitely put people under pressure. And a good charismatic leader at the right time, the right place, may be able to diffuse some of those situations by just a little bit of dry humor that can be interjected there. But that's up to that person at the given time. There's a time and a place for it. Also, the charismatic leader is going to foster good transparency, communication, and again, connecting the team with the message. The message being delivered sometimes may be a harsh message due to the fact that the situation is merited as such. And then it might be something that's going to be a less dramatic. And it's going to just depend. It depends. It depends on the situation, depends on the team, depends on who's involved, the stress level, the amounts of issues that are occurring all at one time, and how the leader is going to be able to mitigate those circumstances again. So the charismatic leader is definitely demonstrating a self-confidence, a strong willing to accept moral and ethical values, as well as communicating the high expectations and supporting the person with a good, solid message. And speaking of good, solid message, you have to be authentic. Thus is the reason why we have authentic leadership. Being transparent and communicating those details and providing those answers will definitely minimize some of the questions that are out there. And then you're going to have the people that are working alongside you that have a vested interest in what you have to say. Having a team that believes in you definitely works much better than a team that does not want to work alongside you. I'm sure we've experienced those situations. I'm sure we've had issues where we've gone home and probably just sat down and said, what did we just accomplish today? Perhaps nothing. Then there's other days where you say, boy, the team is on board and everyone's there. You have to gauge and understand what you've done in order to create that atmosphere, because it comes from the leader. But being authentic, direct and upfront, will definitely be of benefit to you. And lastly, this allows for a greater sense of community. Being authentic makes a warm feeling within the team, the room, and others are going to be able to relate to one another, trust one another, and more importantly, they'll be able to trust you in making the final decision. They'll be able to trust you in making those discussions more valuable and understand that there's a reason why the decision was made. An authentic leader is also going to include people. A good leader in general has the habit of perhaps not including all thoughts and ideas, but it's good to listen to each and every one that's sitting around the table and asking what they believe, what their thoughts and ideas are regarding that situation, compiling that information, and then coming back to make a final decision based on what everyone has said. And that's where you flow with your great speech and say, based on what I've found that everyone is saying here, and let me get this straight, this is what you're all saying, correct? Then there's stakeholder buy-in, and that's where being transparent, communicating, and a vested interest comes in, because they say, hey, I made that suggestion and I made that situation. And then it allows, again, for that greater sense of community to work alongside one another and then understand that their opinions are well thought out, that their opinions are considered, and that they are a true valued member of the team. And of course, on the other hand, you do have servant leadership. No, I don't mean that you're going out and offering people adult sodas and beverages and things and having a little towel around your wrist. No, I'm talking about servant leadership in a different way, that leaders are going to build strong relationships, that they're going to have followers, they're going to connect with the organization, and then the community is going to be able to identify with them. Also, your political stakeholders are going to be involved here. A servant leader doesn't mean that they're going to bow down and accept each and everything that's going to be thrown at them. That defeats the whole purpose of leadership. However, servant leadership, in this case, indicates that you're willing to listen to ideas, that you're willing to work alongside others, that others are able to connect with you, that you are approachable as a leader, and that society at large, meaning the community that you're working in, will definitely be of great value and being able to identify with you a little bit more. An emergency manager could decide to form a coalition consisting of community stakeholders, and this is where servant leadership comes into play. A coalition of emergency response can be formed and perhaps is a good idea for that community due to the fact that they may not have anything, that people don't know one another. A servant is kind of like being a good steward. A good steward oftentimes uses the education that he or she has and promotes that education and gives to others, and then it lets others participate and communicate with the group. Community stakeholders can involve so many different people, whether it's going to be the alphabet police that are out there, or if it's going to include just political stakeholders or community volunteers that are sitting at the table. This is an all-inclusive area, and having a servant leadership background definitely can be beneficial to you, and sometimes it can be detrimental because sometimes you might be too nice. That's where the balance comes in. That's where your personal flair comes in being either an authentic leader, a transformational leader, a servant leader, etc. In whatever situation that may arise, you may have to just adjust what you are normally comfortable with, whether it's going to be a meeting where you're going to be a servant leader, whether it's going to be an authoritative leader where a final and firm decision needs to be made because so many lives are dependent upon it. It will all depend on those areas. And once again, I thank you for attending a live session number 2. We have one more session to go. We'll look just a quick summation of week 6 through 8, and then we will conclude our third live session for this term. I definitely thank you for your participation throughout the term with your assignments, and if there are any discussions that are being done, as well as the work that you have submitted in APA standards, because that's a big part of everything. Keep in mind, too, that writing is part of being an emergency manager. You do have to formalize your memos, you do have to formalize your documents, and you do have to write policies. There are templates out there. However, being grammatically correct definitely can have benefit, especially if the press is going to be taking a look at some of those items that you're sending out. So very good to see all of you once again over here. I do hope that you are enjoying the course, and I look forward to seeing you in session number 3.